Hey everybody, this is Sonny Wasserman back for the 271st Green Grassroots Emergency Election Protection Coalition Zoom call. We are glad to have you all with us, and boy, we got a packed couple of hours here. I just want to note in passing that July 21st will be the 150th anniversary of Little Bighorn, where I don't have to tell you all what's happened there. I do highly recommend a documentary on Netflix about Chief Sitting Bull. It's an amazing moment in our history. I also want to call to task, and you probably are hearing this first, that a global blame needs to be heaped on the shoulders of William Tecumseh Sherman. He was the Union general who burned Atlanta, but he is also the Union general who ordered the extinction of the buffalo. And we're going to talk about this again later, but it's something I learned in the documentary on Little Bighorn and Chief Sitting Bull. So we want to commemorate that. We also want to commemorate very quickly the people of Albania. There are 1 million people in the streets in Albania opposing this latest development from Jared Kushner and Trump's daughter. And there are only 2.5 million people in Albania. So half the country of Albania is in the streets. That may be a record, I don't know, but congratulations to the people of Albania. We have a ton to talk about today. We want to start with the wonderful HEDY TRIPP. We want to catch up with what's happening in Minnesota. Then we're going to go to Steve. Mike, you have brought a guest to talk about fighting the urban-rural balance. And then we're going to go to the great Ray McClendon from Georgia, one of the most astonishing political events that I can ever remember. The Georgia legislature has declined to gerrymander a black district out. So Ray McClendon is going to give us the inside scoop on that. And Ray is just now joining us. HEDY TRIPP from St. Cloud. Can you tell us what's been going on with the insane prosecutions that the Department of Injustice has been foisting on Minnesota, please?
Yeah, before I go through that, just want to state that ICE is still detaining people in Minnesota. About 20 roofers, that means construction workers who were working on the roof, were detained in Bemidji on Thursday. And ICE is still continuing to fly out detainees through the international airport of Minneapolis-St. Paul.
Unbelievable.
Now, Bemidji is famous for the larger-than-life statues of Paul Bunyan and Babe, the Blue Ox, but it's also a cultural hub for three tribal nations: Leech Lake, White Earth, and Red Lake, and as many as 70 different indigenous tribes represented there. ICE tried to arrest a Leech Band member thinking he was Mexican. What, what I've
Go
gathered,
back where you came from.
yeah, what I've gathered from social and local media and my analysis is now most immigrants are arrested, first detained at the Whipple building, then sent to Texas. Whipple building, by the way, is the former detention camp for the 1,600 Dakota women, children, and elderly following the 1862 U.S.-Dakota War. Now, Metro Search has already caused 1,700 people in Minnesota to be deported, now mainly to Mexico, Central America, and South America. Now, although ICE arrested around 100 Somali immigrants, only 2 were deported to Somalia. And lawyers they filed like 1,000 habeas corpus petitions challenging detentions. And, these are volunteer lawyers. Now, remember, Trump's administration's stated purpose for Operation Metro Surge was to round up Somali Minnesotans, right? That whole thing. Then it shifted in January to focus on criminal illegal aliens of all backgrounds, describing them as worst of the worst. But only 1 in 15 were eventually deported, so it's a little crazy. Now, During the Metro Surge, the networks of volunteers used signal messages to communicate with each other. Now, DOJ hacked into the signal messages and are using statements against these 15 Minnesota anti-ICE protesters,
Unbelievable.
using these statements to charge them with conspiracy and to impede or injure a federal agent. And I think it's good. I'm just going to go quickly onto what the charges were and what they were using. Now, this group has espoused direct action resistance to ICE. Supposedly, they posted inflammatory videos on Instagram calling on anti-ICE protesters, so these two groups, right, to get their F guns and stop these F people. They followed ICE officers from the Whipple building to Wisconsin. They are charged with interstate stalking. They followed federal vehicles, even though they wanted to stop. And this was happening even in St. Cloud. We were following, these ICE vehicles as to where they're going. They flipped a trailer, formed human chains on roadways. Brake checking and side swiping, not sure what that is, a federal officer on the road. They knocked an ICE agent's notes out of his hand, and they're charged with assault on a federal officer. They kicked a federal vehicle 2 times, leaving dents. They're charged with destruction of federal property. So this is what, before the conspiracy charge, this is all the other charges they are facing. Now compare that to Rennie Good, being shot in the head, Alex Briddy in the back, and then calling these 2 domestic terrorists. And you all have seen the visual documentation on it. It's a lie. Will the ICE murderers be brought to trial? That's a question. The conspiracy charges were, again, on the pages of Signal. They used meetings, shield, and de-arrest trainings to arrange blockades. And the statement, we need to be ungovernable. We need to resist any way we can to materially stop the Nazi occupation. This has become a conspiracy charge. And then there's another statement that is really, I think, really important to think about. They said, when they, the nonviolent protesters, find a kidnapping in progress, there's not a strong culture of physically resisting. We encountered a ton of pushback from libs in every rapid response group. So you have a violent group or espousing violence and nonviolence, which I think is a very strategic divide and conquer tactic. So that is my statement for you today. I will have more next week. I will be with some journalists and Asian American conference, and I'll let you know then. Thank
Hetty,
you.
it's always fantastic to have you. Thank you so much. Steve, did you want to jump in then? I want to greet Ray McClendon. Ray, we're honored to have you with your astonishing report from Georgia.
I
We
know.
want you to meet HEDY TRIPP from Minnesota, and Anthony, and Mike Hurst is going to introduce Anthony, and then we'll get the report from Ray McClendon. HEDY, that was great. Is there anything else you want to add? HEDY?
She pop out. I was going to ask her how many of the 1,700 people that were deported got served habeas corpus properly, and worse, voting U.S. citizens. Thank you. That's all.
Yeah, Hetty had to go really quickly, but she plans to be back next week.
Okay. Well, listen, Hetty's always, of course, truly great. We're going to have Mike Hirsch. We want you to introduce Anthony so that Anthony can connect with Ray McClendon. Anthony, you'll give us a rundown on your work, and then we'll go to Ray McClendon's astonishing report from Georgia. Mike, you want to introduce Anthony, please?
Yeah, absolutely. It's my honor and pleasure to introduce Anthony Flaccavento. All we hear these days is how divisive American politics and society are, and how people are turning against one another. We don't know each other. We don't trust each other. We don't like each other, can't stand each other. Anthony is one of the few people who's actually doing something to make a difference, to make things better. He is one of the leaders of what's called the Rural Urban Bridge Initiative, RUBI, and it's as precious as that precious gemstone ruby. It brings people from different backgrounds together and shows them how much they have in common and how much they need to work together. And it's initiatives like Anthony's that have been covered by a lot of different media, and we're very honored to have him. It's initiatives like Anthony's, and there's very few initiatives like Anthony's that provide hope for me and for our country that we can muddle through these dark times and emerge together on the other side and unite among certain principles and get it together. So please take it away, Anthony.
And Nancy, we want to make sure you meet Ray McClendon, who's on the ground in Georgia, and who's going to give us who's been with us for all the way since these calls began, and going to give us some perspective. You two need to be in touch. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Sonny. Thanks, Mike, and honored to meet you, Mr. McClendon. Looking forward to hearing your report from Georgia. Very encouraging stuff there. We actually have a really strong presence in one of our initiatives in rural Georgia. So I'm going to race through some slides. Apologies in advance.
Okay, but remember you're on the radio, so you got to be very explicit verbally.
I will enunciate, Sonny. If I start defaulting to my Appalachian speak, then you can help me kind of get back at it. But we're really talking about how the Democratic Party and the left more broadly can win back rural voters in 2026 and beyond. The way we do that, I'm looking for there we go. So we start with this. We really have to look at where we've gone wrong in order to understand what to do better, what to do right. Back in 2016, the beginning of the Trump era, a month before the election, Senator Schumer famously or infamously said, for every blue-collar Democrat we lose in Western Pennsylvania, we'll pick up 2 moderate Republicans in the suburbs in Philadelphia. You can repeat that in Ohio and Illinois and Wisconsin. Well, it didn't work out that way in 2016, but more broadly, what happens when leaders of the party of the working class dismiss the working class, as unfortunately Senator Schumer did then? Well, that's been going on for quite some time, but you get the peak of it was the 2024 election. And this map shows, those red arrows show movement towards Trump and the Republicans. And the remarkable thing about that is that every single state in the nation except Washington State, blue or red, West Coast, East Coast, Mid and South, move towards the Republicans. A lot of times we tend on our side of the ledger to focus on incredible.
Remember, we are nonpartisan, so we're not Democrat or Republican, but you're free to be. So go ahead.
Okay.
As long as you don't raise money, go ahead.
Yes. No, don't give me money. So a lot of times we put the focus on racism, and that's obviously it's rampant throughout this Trump administration. It's kind of in their DNA. And frankly, for a goodly chunk of the followers of MAGA, race, homophobia, all of that is absolutely part of their motivations. But it's not everybody. And RUBI addresses its efforts towards the broader working class, including people who are not driven by race. And it's important to note that the movement towards Republicans, look at this number here, has been not just among rural people or white people, but this shows that among people of color, voters without a degree, which is a proxy for working class voters of color, over a 12-year period, there was a 37-point movement towards the Republicans and MAGA. So it's more than a problem of white people who've lost their status and privilege. Why? Because across race, gender, and age, so many of us in this country feel alienated, and as a result of that, we feel a deep mistrust. The Frameworks Culture of Change Project a couple of years ago said that the system being rigged by those in power at the expense of ordinary people had become a dominant explanation for people across the political spectrum. Here's the challenge we face as we resist Trump, as Trump tears down everything about this country, and including plenty of very good programs, institutions, policies. If we simply oppose Trump, we often sound like we're defending the system that tens of millions of Americans feel was rigged against them. And so we have to be very careful about it. In our rural urban divide training, which we do all across the country. It's really worth it if you've never been through it. I'm going to give you just a tiny taste of it. We go into what we consider to be the 5 underlying causes of what divides us and what has moved so many working people away from Democrats. And it starts with an economy that has not worked for most Americans. The bottom 80%. Top 1% has done spectacularly. Top 20% have done pretty well. But for the rest of us, wealth hasn't trickled down, as Ronald Reagan promised. It's been sucked up from workers and small businesses and family farmers and ordinary people to a few at the top. This has led to this widespread economic insecurity, which is particularly common in communities of color and in rural areas. The sense that maybe I've got a job today, maybe we're hanging in there, but I just don't know about tomorrow as factories close and jobs leave. This betrayal of rural communities has really been going on for more than 4 decades. And even though the Republicans are the masters of it, even though the Republicans have relentlessly pushed income and wealth upwards, the fact of the matter is that both parties have been part of this bipartisan betrayal of rural and working class people. We could go through a whole list of the faults on the Democratic side, from bad bank policy to terrible trade policy to a lack of enforcement of antitrust that let corporations get bigger and bigger. But this economic betrayal, very widespread, has led to a deep sense of anger against elites. Now, again, on our side, we feel that too. We don't like Musk and Thiel and Bezos and all those people. But in the country and among working people, they define elites certainly to include the very wealthy, but also people like us, city folks, highly educated people, liberals, Democrats, intellectuals, academics. And the reason is twofold. First of all, they see us as having helped to design the system, because there tends to be more people, more liberals, who work within government and within the big institutions that do kind of set the rules. And also because, relatively speaking, we have fared better through this 40-year economic decline than most blue-collar working and rural folks. And so they put us among the elites, and this has fostered what Kathy Kramer called a politics of resentment. Now, for the most part, over these last 15 to 20 years preceding Trump and through the Trump years, our response to this growing resentment has been to minimize it or ignore it, obviously with exceptions. But as a movement on the left, we've tended to discount it, to attribute it just to people angry with losing their status. So our electoral strategy instead has focused primarily on turning out the base. Now, turning out the base is absolutely critical. It will be in 2026, but it's not sufficient when the base is shrinking. And as Mike Lux showed in an analysis he did of 10 Midwestern states that include most of the swing states, the turnout the base strategy is the blue bars on the left. The emphasis was on getting more votes in cities, in the suburbs, more votes in college towns. And it worked. About 500,000 new voters in cities, in suburbs, and college and universities. Unfortunately, at the same time that we were turning out the base, huge numbers of people left the Democratic Party, more than 500,000 rural people and over 2 million people from small towns and mid-sized towns that were dominated by manufacturing, factory towns, as Mike Lux called them. So a net loss of 2 million votes. Now, here's the deal, and this is where I'm going to shift towards what we can do. This is the best moment we have had in years, I would say decades, to begin to win these voters back, to begin to re-broaden our base. And again, I am not talking about every MAGA voter and all of the people who are horrifically racist and other vile things, but I'm talking about millions of people that have left the Democratic Party or they're independents. This is the time, because Trump's net approval among rural folks, is the core of his base, has fallen from a plus 20 just at the beginning of his term to a minus 14 in May of this year. It's a huge drop. And when you focus on rural white voters, that the first statistic is all rural voters, just 16% say that their families are better off than they were 2 years ago. 49% say they're worse off. 3 times as many people. It's extraordinary. We have this opportunity. So how do we do it? Whether you're a Democrat trying to win them back for the party, or whether you're just somebody who's a progressive, somebody on the left who believes that we have to overcome the divide, RUBI has developed this framework we call Think Different, Talk Different, and Act Different. I'm just going to go through a little sample of each to give you a taste of what that means. I'll mention that we have a lot of resources on our website, very simple, ruralurbandbridge.org. We have studies, we have guidebooks. The Talk Like a Neighbor is all about communications across ideology and to working class folks. We do monthly briefings, really great folks across the spectrum. Next month in July, on July 8th, we have a gentleman called Rich Logis who started a group called Leaving MAGA. He was a dedicated MAGA acolyte who at some point saw the error of his ways, and now he's created a national group that tries to woo people who are having second thoughts and support them in transitioning out. So those are the kinds of topics we have. We do our training, our rural urban divide training, and other trainings all across the country. We've done it about 100 times now. We work on changing the narrative in the media. So we have a monthly column in The Nation. We've had it for 2 years, which is called Rethinking Rural. And we have just started a 4-part series in The Guardian. My article was the first of 4, came out a couple of weeks ago. A couple of other things about thinking differently. We have to remember that rural voters are actually the most persuadable. What this study shows is the shift by demographic breakdown, the likelihood of people shifting from red to blue to red to blue. Rural voters shifted the most. This is in contrast to what many on the left think about rural voters. They see them as like a hard, monolithic group. You can't change their minds, just forget about them. It's actually quite the opposite. And one more thing about thinking differently, while all of us here, I'm sure, have been part of the No Kings, the resistance, et cetera, which has played such a critical role in mobilizing against Trump, and it's got to continue. But as this study from Katie Osborne and Scott Warren just published in The Atlantic showed, if we focus solely on the threat to democracy, it does not resonate with most of the voters that we can win. As they put it, activists seeking to protect American democracy are largely perceived as defending abstract democratic processes. Such arguments are unlikely to resonate with voters who've come to believe that many of these norms and processes have abandoned the country's values. Few care to preserve a system they feel stopped serving its purpose long ago. So just a democracy message doesn't work. Second area, acting differently. As Ken Martin put it at the DNC meeting in New Orleans a few weeks ago, we can't just be against Trump. We have to be for something. Ruby's been saying that for quite some time now. So part of what we're for is seasoned, thoughtful, far-reaching rural policy. We wrote with PDA, with Progressive Democrats of America, 2 years ago, a rural New Deal. It's very far-reaching, but it's based on tried and true solutions, and it was written by and for rural people. It's based on 10 pillars, starting with rebuilding farm and forest economies, but moving through many other areas. And then each of those pillars is teased out in detail with very specific recommendations, policies, areas for investment that would actually help us reignite rural America and build a much better economy overall.
Okay.
Is somebody speaking?
I just want you to let you know that Ray is in the wings here, and it'd be good to turn over to him as soon as you can.
Yeah, I'll wrap it up real quick. So just the other element that we do is we work on local engagement. A lot of people are realizing that when you pull out of these factory towns, when you pull out of rural areas and leave it to the right, by God, they jump in and take advantage of it. We have a trust problem, and we have to overcome that. Trust always precedes persuasion. When I ran for Congress in 2018 in Virginia's 9th, over and over, I heard this kind of sentiment. I like you. I'd like to send a farmer to Congress, but I could never vote for a Democrat. So how do we rebuild trust? Is it by showing up in protest mode? Well, that's one thing to do, but we also have to show up working in the community. And Meredith Dean, who directs our Community Works program, leads that effort. We work with local groups, including local Democratic committees, but other groups as well, to simply do concrete, non-political activities all across the community. Everything from home repair to food distribution to kids' activities. It is amazing. We started in rural Virginia and rural Georgia, and now we've expanded to 8 states. And we just studied the results of this. And sure enough, this study that looked before and after, comparing the counties that had community works to those that did not, showed these, I won't go through them all for time, but showed that absolutely in just 2 years, we started to shift people's hearts and minds, less hostility, more openness to the left and to Democrats, more willingness to judge people on their actions locally instead of big labels. Check it out. You can do it through our website. I'm going to go ahead and skip the last section. I will just go.
Well, you'll come back. We'll have you back to do more.
Yeah.
I want to point out that Ray McClendon, we've been talking with Ray for years now about relational organizing. And you know how one of the themes that of these calls for the last 6 years has been how much money is wasted by so-called progressive candidates on media buys as opposed to hiring people, paying local people to do relational organizing on a grassroots basis. And so a lot of the things that you've said here, Anthony, resonate straight into what Ray has been telling us for years. Ray, do you want to jump in with that?
No, I absolutely agree. And in all of those races that Anthony reflected and how the arrows were moving right in virtually every state, a lot of that not only has to do with some changes in metro areas, but certainly in the rural areas. We saw that here in Georgia. And we know how important the rural vote is. Primarily, that's the South Georgia vote here. And one of the things that we have recognized over the years is that you have to have a different strategy when you go into rural areas. The same messaging does not resonate in rural areas that resonate in the metro areas. And that's one of the things that a lot of campaigns don't do. It's one of the things that we try to do because we talk and listen to local people. So in addition to the trust factor, I think it's fundamental to have messaging where the priorities focus on what rural voters are suffering from and not just what are some nice pillars of a campaign. And those are significantly divergent here in Georgia from what are the main issues in metro versus what people are looking for in rural. The second thing is that across the South, I don't know what it looks like in West Virginia and other areas, but here in the South, there are significant black belts. And those black belts are in rural areas because that's where the plantations were. And so you're going to see significant black populations in those areas. So it's not just a fact of focusing on white voters, but focusing on all those voters and having messaging that focuses on what the issues are that resonate with both black and white voters in those rural areas. Because there are hundreds of thousands in Georgia, there are hundreds of thousands of black voters that live in the rural belt in Georgia.
Anthony, you mentioned that you had some activism in your organization in Georgia.
Yes.
You're muted.
Yep, I'm back. Yes, in fact, we have 3 of these community work chapters, and they're among the most dynamic. And what's so interesting about this, again, remember the community works, even though it involves the local county Democratic Committee, it is completely non-political in the work itself. It's all just doing stuff, fixing problems in your community. But what's happening besides changing hearts and minds of conservative neighbors is that we get all these testimonials from people, and probably more so in Georgia counties than anywhere, people who will say to us, look, I was one of those people who was sitting on the couch. I thought politics was hopeless. I didn't do anything. Now with Community Works, I've got a new view, and some of those people have gone on to run for elected office. They've gone from completely disavowing politics through Community Works and the sense of community it creates to actually becoming members of their school board or their county supervisors or their planning commission. So we're seeing that taking this non-political approach is actually activating people politically, which is, again, a really great outcome.
Well, you and Ray need to be in direct communication.
Too.
Because this is absolutely critical. And Allison, you've got a hand. Can you be very quick, or can you wait for Ray to present and then jump in?
Sure, I'll be really quick. Anthony, I actually have contacts in the construction industry in New York City in high-end residential, and I've been on top of rooftops where we have actual gardens, for example. And I think it would be tremendous if you want to get in touch with me. I'll put my details in the chat to have a rural exchange program where you have rural farm workers working in the rooftops of New York City while you have New York City people working in the rural areas. So I would love to talk to you about an exchange program because
Excellent.
yeah.
And unfortunately, we had HEDY TRIPP who just reported that ICE is arresting workers off of rooftops in Minnesota. Probably their crime is installing solar panels, but beyond that, here we are. And so, Anthony, I want you to stay with us, and Allison and everybody. We have almost 70 people with us. Ray, we have 70 people with us. Ray, can you tell us what has just happened in Georgia, and if I'm overstating the case when I say it's absolutely earth-shaking?
Well, it was a major about face with the MAGA Republicans in the state legislature at the 11th hour, really at the 11th hour and 59 minutes, deciding that they were not going to move forward with redistricting in the special session, which was specifically called by Governor Kemp to do redistricting among the priorities that they had for the session. We believe that the reason for them backtracking relates to a couple of things. Number one, all of the rallies, town halls, and so forth that occurred across the state that culminated in various protests at the Capitol that really shook them when they saw the response from the people with regard to what they were about to do to Black voters here in Georgia. Essentially, the redistricting, as you know from the Supreme Court decision, is a brazen attempt to reduce Black representation. There's Black representation not just in Congress, but also in state legislatures across the South. We've seen what happened in Louisiana and Tennessee and others. And the same thing was about to happen here, but Georgia citizens rose up, they protested, they rallied, and that had an impact. Second thing that had an impact is that we also had runoff elections on Tuesday. And in the runoff elections, we saw that Burt Jones, who's the current lieutenant governor and who was the candidate of choice of the current president, lost to an outsider, Rick Jackson, who is a billionaire and spent over $100 million of his own money in his campaign. The lieutenant governor is also the leader of the Senate in Georgia. So you had and Kemp was supporting the lieutenant governor in the race. So you had political blowback because the person who would be overseeing the Senate, Burt Jones, and the governor who called a special election have egg on their face in the governor's race, and also the governor lost, his candidate lost in the runoff for the Senate seat to go up against Ossoff. His candidate did. So when you look at that backdrop, I think that the legislature got very nervous, and they decided that they did not want to stir up more Black voters and mobilize more Black voters going into November, because now it appears that those races are going to be much more competitive than we've seen in the last 20 years, notwithstanding Stacey Abrams and what she's been able to do. These races now look to be very winnable going forward. So that's the main focus. That's number one. The second thing that has gotten less attention, but is going to be very significant, is the fact that they are taking up a bill to eliminate QR codes from the ballot. In Georgia, we use machines that then print out your ballot results, and it lists on the ballot who you voted for, but what the scanners read is a QR code. So 2 years ago, the legislature decided to eliminate the QR codes, but they didn't come up with an alternative. So now they're grappling with an alternative, which most people understand and agree needs to be done. However, a major amendment sticking point has come up, which a lot of the civic engagement and civil rights groups are opposing, which is an amendment that would allow for hand counting the votes of the top two races in the general election. Now think about that for a minute. You're only going to hand count two races, and those are the top two races. What are the top two races? The top two races are for governor and for U.S. Senate. Many believe that the theory behind this is that they know that that is going to muck up the voting apparatus in Fulton County and DeKalb County, the largest counties that also happen to have the most Democratic voters and the most Black voters.
Ray, real quick, I just wanted to ask Anthony before he had to leave how, Georgia's done a great job. You were able to stop the redistricting, but your neighboring state, Tennessee, eviscerated Memphis and split it up into three largely rural districts. And I was wondering if Anthony had insight on how efforts like RUBI to reach out to rural voters who the Republicans take for granted might actually have an impact and make it blow up in their face like you were talking about.
Yeah, I mean, it's a $64,000 question for sure. And I would say that Mr. McClendon probably has as good or better idea on that strategy. I think that we have both a long term and a short term in all of this. The long term is an approach like Community Works. It's basically very fundamental, very old school, rebuilding trust by rebuilding our neighborly connections. I think they're desperate for that in Tennessee as well, where unfortunately we don't have any Community Works at this point. But I think in the long term, that will make an enormous difference. When you work side by side with somebody over and over and over the course of a year, it's really hard to hate them. It's really hard to believe they're some kind of mythically dreadful creature. And so that's the long-term answer. In the short run, I think the probably best thing we can do to fight back is to simultaneously show the incompetence and the sort of treachery of the Tennessee legislature and congressional delegation, but also to put out a really clarion clear call for rural development policy that will work. The Rural New Deal or very specific policies that come from the Rural New Deal, like the right to repair, like the fight against monopolization in the food and farm system and the health system, et cetera. We have to do more than just say they're terrible. We have to also say, this is what we'll do if you give us a chance to return to power. I think that's.
Well, I think you know, the dialogue, and Anthony, you and Ray certainly need to be in touch. The dialogue we've been hearing from Ray over the years is exactly that in terms of relational organizing. Because if we can get the money that's going to progressive causes in elections away from the media buys and into hiring people at the grassroots levels to knock on doors and hold, you know, hot dog roasts and stuff like that, it's a whole time shift and a paradigm shift. And Ray, I think I want to. I get. Does everybody understand what happened here in Georgia? Here you've got this national groundswell by the right wing to eliminate black voting districts, congressional districts at all, and state legislature districts. And here in Georgia, the heart of the South, the white-dominated, MAGA-dominated Republican legislature has been forced to step back from doing exactly what's been at the top of the list. Am I overstating the case, Ray?
No, you're not. You're not. And it just goes to show that the power of resistance is real power. And they want to keep us disengaged and apathetic. And they didn't realize how much of a hornet's nest they had really stirred up here in Georgia. And I think now they want to attempt to lull us back to sleep. Now, it's not over. It doesn't mean that this is the end. It just means that they have decided that now is not the time because they have awoken a sleeping giant in the short run. But they hope we're going to go back to sleep. And so they'll probably bring this back at some point in the future if they can reorganize. But there's no doubt that this was a clear resistance shot across their bow, and it scared them dramatically. This was in no uncertain terms a major victory in the short run.
Well, it's astounding to me, and I think the other thing, the issue to discuss, and Mike, I see your hand, I'll get you in a sec, is that the other day I got a fundraiser on email from Tallarico in Texas, I'm sure many folks are excited about, and it said he's raising money to buy an ad on the World Cup videos. And I almost picked up my computer and threw it across the room. I mean, here, what has Ossoff? You know, they're starting to talk about Ossoff as a candidate for president, which he's Jewish, man. Come on, but you know that's not going to happen. But has the Democratic Party in Georgia gotten any of the message about the things that Anthony and you have been talking about in terms of relational organizing? Is any of the money?
Yeah, we're in discussions with them right now, and we're talking to them about this. The challenge is with people like Ossoff. Ossoff's a very bright guy, very astute, a great messenger himself. The challenge is always penetrating the campaign staff top tier. And in order to get to the right people with the right strategy about how effective this can be. And that's all, and as we've said many times on this show and others, those people's self-interest are not aligned with putting a lot of money into grassroots relational organizing. It just isn't because of the way that their compensation is set up and the way egos are. That's just a fact.
Right. Well, the campaigns, the top levels of the campaign staff often get a percentage kickback for the media buys. And
Exactly.
if there's a structural problem with the Democratic Party's campaigning, it's that. And by the way, Steve Bannon, of all people, within the last week or two, issued a statement that he is, that the MAGA people are not doing enough grassroots organizing, and they're wasting their money on media. That sent to hear that coming from Steve Bannon, that sent shivers up my spine.
You're absolutely right. I heard the same thing, Sluggo. You're absolutely right. They know it, and they are intending to recalibrate their strategy to do some of the things that we're begging folks on the left, the progressives, to do the same thing. Don't put all of this. We're not saying don't to move, 100%, not even 50%. Just move 10% of the money away from these massive media buys, especially in rural communities, as we just talked about, and in Black communities. It just doesn't work.
Man, it's terrifying. Mike Hurst, did you want to jump in real quick?
Yeah, about that, I'll get to my point after this. But yeah, these consultants, I'm more and more convinced that they make more money by losing than winning.
Yes.
And they give bad advice either on purpose or accidentally on purpose, because it's a lot easier to raise the big money that they pay themselves when you have a boogeyman in the White House. Because when you have Obama or even a Joe Biden in the White House, a lot of people relax and they're not willing to take out their credit card and go and make these big donations. These people make millions of dollars a month for going on MSNBC and CNN and arguing with nitwits who are defending whatever Trump does, and nothing gets accomplished. They don't advance Medicare for all. They don't advance election security. They don't challenge the orthodoxy of nuclear power, nuclear weapons, or massive military spending. They just basically say Trump is bad, even if he's doing the same thing Democrats did when they were in office. It's all a joke. And like Ray is implying, people of color, working class people, they are smart enough to know when they're being had. And they don't like it. They don't like it if Republicans do it. They don't like it if Democrats do it.
Right.
If Democrats continue to do it, we're just going to continue to flounder.
Right. And I have to say, as everybody, like everybody else, I get tons of email from progressive candidates, and they all start by asking for money.
That's right.
Nobody asks, can you go knock on doors? Can you make phone calls? Can you send postcards?
They don't even talk about what they're going to
ridiculous.
do. They talk about Trump is doing this. Trump's going to sneak into your bedroom and steal your favorite pillow, and he's going to kick your puppy on the way out the door.
Right.
Send me $50. Like they're going to do anything about it. And what it really comes down to is this. It's like what Anthony's talked about. We need a program of what we're for. It's not enough to just be against Trump, because if we get rid of Trump, we're still stuck with the mess that he made. We have to have clear defined plans to repair the damage to our electoral system, to our energy system, to our schools, to our government, to our infrastructure. We can't just go back to, we're stopping the damage from Trump, and we still got it. What they say is, somebody sticks a dagger in your back and then pulls it out 3 inches, it's still halfway in there. So we got to go and reverse this, repair this, and it goes back decades, way before Trump, and people know it. And unless we build up the trust that Anthony and Ray are talking about by being trustworthy, You don't just ask for people's trust, you earn it. And
So-
we have to do that.
Although this grassroots campaigning, Ray, that you've been pushing for, you and Andrea in particular, and now we got Anthony on board here. How do we move it forward?
Well, we've got to use strategies like Anthony's been putting forward for rural. We're working across the entire state, both metro and rural. We are organizing around that game plan of relational organizing, which is using trusted messengers to deliver trusted messages to local communities.
Well,
And
that's the phrase, Anthony, that's the phrase I was thinking about that Ray's been using. Trusted messengers. I mean, that's a big one, I think. And that's what you seem to be doing outside the electoral arena. Is that right?
Yes, and I would say that part of the whole approach of having scores of people going out 2 or 3 times a month to do this work side by side with their neighbors is that they become trusted messengers, even if they weren't at the beginning. So you have some people who are well established in most communities who kind of go across the ideological spectrum and everybody thinks they're okay, and they're great. But they're kind of few and far between now because we've become so damaged and polarized. But when you start getting people out working with their neighbors like good neighbors, all of a sudden the number of trusted messengers magnifies greatly.
Wow. Well, Mike, thank you for your beautiful message. And I do want to offer condolences on the passing of your mother. And thank you for being with us today. It's a big deal. And you're always great when you come on. So this is a great connection. Did anybody else want to jump in on this? Again, when Ray told me that the Georgia legislature had backed away from this gerrymandering, I was astounded. And it's not been in the news. I haven't seen it anywhere. But for the Georgia legislature, controlled by the MAGA, to decline to get rid itself of a black congressional district, I think it's astounding. I don't know, has it happened anywhere else in the country?
not that definitively.
Yeah. Okay.
Possibly Indiana.
Oh, yes, that's right. They did back off from him in Indiana. That's interesting. Also, by the way, just for the heck of it, I noticed the polls apparently are showing the Democrat in the U.S. Senate race in Florida being ahead.
Real quick, Sonny, Anthony has to go. So
Okay, Anthony,
let's
thank
thank
you.
him. And Anthony, any final words or?
I'm just grateful to be part of the conversation. Ray, I hope we can connect. I put my email in the chat. I would love to do that. And I really think that you all are on to something. The two pieces, the grassroots relational organizing year round, can't be 3 months before a campaign, year round, combined with the fact that we need clear, strong messages for what we're going to do different. We're not just going to beat Trump. We're going to develop a system that works for everyday people. Those are the two key points. And if we can all get on with that, I think we'll be stronger for it.
Well, two more things. Allison raised an interesting piece about farming. You
got a couple of questions.
Please.
You got a couple of questions too.
Okay, there's Sue and then Anna, and then we'll go back to Allison. Sue Dorfman and Anna Georgie. Sue, are you muted?
Yeah, no. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes, we
please.
can.
Okay. Yeah, so this is a question for Ray. Sean Harris is running to take Marjorie Taylor Greene's seat that's up in the north western corner of the state. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the strategy that is going on in terms of doing outreach. One of the things that when I was up there, Sean Harris had said was, well, if the Democrats put any money into this race, I might have a chance. The other thing I do want to comment on is actually two things. I do believe that media ad buys are really good when they are done strategically, especially when you can do media ad buys in ethnic media, Black media, Hispanic media, rural media, which is a lot cheaper than doing it with the major networks. One of the things that I have seen driving around the country is the absolute total lack of billboards posters in small towns, rural areas. They tend to be clustered around the city, so that if you didn't know that there was an election happening, there would be no visible signs in many parts of southern Georgia during the runoffs.
Anna, can Ray answer and you could ask the rest of your question?
Sure.
Well,
You
go ahead,
Anna?
Ray. Answer Sue if you would, and then we'll go to Ann and Georgie.
Yeah. Thanks, Sue. And I appreciate that. Sean's race for Marjorie Taylor Greene's old seat what is going to be an uphill battle because that's a ruby red district now. Pouring some more investment into it from the Democratic side and the party side potentially would help. And I know he ran a great race before, and I think he's an excellent candidate. The problem is that the numbers are just so stacked against him there that I don't see much. I don't see as much hope there as I do in several other areas. And let me give you an example. We've got opportunities where in another district on the east side of the state where it's 47% non-white. And we potentially could pick that up, but we have never gotten the kind of A, the right candidate, and B, the kind of grassroots activity to mobilize the vote in that area. So that's one that's ripe for the taking. Now we think that they potentially have a candidate now, but there needs to be a dramatic investment in that congressional district where the demographics are much more favorable than they are in Marjorie Taylor Greene's district.
So
go
can I
ahead.
just ask a question that if the money is not put in to do the on the ground organizing now, even though the candidate may lose this particular race, and by the way, Sean Harris is somebody who we absolutely need in Congress. He is beyond brilliant, and he's a military strategist with a background in the Middle East. That all said, if the money, and this is just a more broad question, if the money is not put into building the on the ground coalitions, even though a candidate may lose, then they will never be candidates that are going to win in those particular districts. So turning it back to you.
No, and I understand it, and I appreciate your comments. And like I said, Sean is certainly a great candidate. He's someone we need. The challenge is when you look at the entire state, from my view, this is just my personal view, that we've got some high value opportunities that if the money would just flow to invest in those areas, we could really pick up a seat in Congress, and we can potentially flip the state House of Representatives. Okay, and the ability to flip the state House of Representatives, we need to flip about 9 seats. The state House of Representatives could be an extraordinary achievement, and would break up almost 30 years of power by the Republicans in Georgia. So the powers that be have got to make that decision. Now, the second thing you talked about was, we need billboards. We need some of the more low tech avenues. We need radio, et cetera. And outside of the metropolitan Atlanta area, we need that kind of investment. What I've been talking about is, and this started, I have to give you the history on this real quick. Remember we had 2 Senate races and both of them went into runoffs in 2020. There was probably $500 million spent on the runoff. And people were bombarded with TV ads constantly. I mean, every other ad you saw on TV all day long was about the race. And people just tuned it out. They just tuned it out. Now, what made the difference in that race where we were getting out in the street and we had the right kind of relational organizing strategy based upon the fact we had been in the street, not since maybe September, October, but we have been in the streets for that entire year because of COVID. We have been out, serving the people, providing food, providing supplies, a lot, PPE, a lot of different things. And there were connections in the community in 2020 that we lost by 2024. And you saw the voter turnout, both in the Black community and Democrats overall, the turnout rate fell. And so a part of what we're saying is that they wanted to say that it was the TV ads that made the difference in the runoffs. We say it was the amount of money that we were putting into relational organizing that was not available in 2024. So it's not that we want to see, like I said earlier, $100 million going into relational organizing. If you gave the civic engagement organizations 1/10 of that, you would see an amazing impact on the results in the election.
Amazing. Anna Georgie, you're in Western Mass. Anna, are you still there? Gotta unmute you here, and then we'll go to Allison Green. There. Oh. I can't get you unmuted here, Anna. Allison Green, go ahead. Oh, there we
She's
go.
unmuted now.
Anna,
Yeah, hi. It says
go ahead.
it says the camera's off from the host, but anyway, I'm sorry, I haven't been listening in lately, but following everything. And, really all these strategies depend on the program. And the program of the Democrats have to focus on restoring the Voting Rights Act, Medicare for all, really these very basic things, health, childcare, the kinds of things that the Democratic Socialists ran on in New York City. And my family is also in Hungary, and the key to the April election there was corruption, fighting corruption, the money that is taken from the people by the corrupt right-wing politician. So I just want to say that these things I think have wide appeal, and I hope that they'll be part of the strategies on the local level, which of course we support.
Well, yeah, and Anna is a veteran of some huge successes. Am I out of bounds here, Ray, if I say that data centers have become a great mobilizer or is it
Data centers have
overrated?
become an absolute issue on left and right. As you know, the Trump administration just backed off of doing a data center in Social Circle, Georgia, which is a sleepy town of about 6,000 people. They were going to more than double the size of the community by bringing in over 10 or 11,000 people into a warehouse. That, and the challenge was they took no consideration to what impact that would have on the city's infrastructure. They did not do any reaching out to the people, to the municipal leaders or anything. So they fought that. Senator Warnock was one of the ones on the front lines on assisting them, even though that community voted 73% for the current administration. So it just goes to show you that that's an issue that people are against.
I've seen a lot of media
that. But let me just say,
I have seen a lot of media saying that the MAGA people really hate data centers.
Yeah, they really hate it. So that is becoming more of an issue. Let me just quickly say about all of those issues on healthcare, and revitalization, et cetera, are very important. Problem that the progressives have is that, and this goes to Anthony's point he was making earlier, you've got to hone your messaging to fit your target audience. And so you can come up with some great ideas like Medicare for all, or even expanding Medicaid in the short run. But when we're talking to voters in rural areas or the Black voters, they're dealing with the fact that we don't have any kind of ability to pay to see a doctor in a rural area within a 30-mile radius. We don't have any way, we can't get an ambulance in South Georgia. Okay.
Harvey, we have Abe Bonner.
Yeah, I know. I see Abe. Abe, I hope you can stick with us for a while, Abe.
Yeah. So I'm saying we have to take something that is a strategic objective, like Medicare for all or expand Medicaid, and then we've got to make it relevant on all of these topics to that target audience where they can understand that we feel their specific pain in that particular area. And that's the extra mile that a lot of times progressives don't go to. We don't go that last mile and say we feel your pain all the way down to something like we can change the whole network of how you get to the hospital. We just say, well, Medicare for all, and then it'll be great. Nothing disparaging about what Anna said, but the messaging has got to be very crisp.
And yes, and personal. Abe, can you stay with us, please, for a while?
Sure. Can you just give me a sense of when you want me to share?
Stick with us.
I'm good. I'm good.
Yeah, Ray's been with us. Did you want to say something, Allison, before Ray goes?
I would love to, but I don't want to interrupt if Abraham needs to take.
Well, we're going to jump to the death penalty, which is not is kind of this. It's a different bailiwick. But Ray, this has been priceless. And in terms of the mechanics of voting that the legislature is going to deal with, we do have Ray Lutz on. And Ray Lutz is a master of this with John Brakey. So I hope maybe you guys can coordinate their expertise with what's going on in terms of the mechanics of voting that the legislature is going to deal with.
Yeah. All right.
Hey,
Thanks.
thank you, Ray. Thank you, Ray McClendon. This was incredibly productive. Thank you so much, everybody. We still have 70 people with us. Allison, and then we're going to go to Abe Bonowitz. We're going to jump to the death penalty, folks, and then to Ukraine. We have Howie Hawkins with us as well. But Allison, did you want to say something? And we'll go to Abe.
Okay, just quickly, I was going to passionately and vehemently agree with Ray about the fact that the messaging seems to be missing the people. And I loved the way Ray was just describing it. And I know that I've always gotten more from knocking on doors than I get from anything else in terms of contributions and talking to people one-on-one. There is no way to ignore that. I think that there were other elements that I'll bring up another time that were part of it.
Great.
But 2020 was definitely about the door knocking during COVID. And instead of starting with something like Medicare for all, if you see a person who opens the door and they're pregnant, I want to tell them passionately, congratulations, but also, are you scared? How long does it take you to get to an obstetrician from where you are? Because that then gets to the medical, fears and underlying issues.
Reality.
Yeah.
And Anna Georgie has been, you and Allison, you and Anna should be in touch. Anna Georgie's been on this kind of case for a long, long time.
Great.
We beat a nuclear plant in our town, again going door to door. And Anna, is very well aware. Did you want to jump in again, Anna, before we go to the death penalty here? I don't know if you're still with us. We have 70 people with us, and
No, thanks everyone. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So we began with a Ray on what I think is an earth-shattering moment, which is that a MAGA legislature in the heart of the South has backed off from getting rid of a black leaning congressional district. We also had a truly mind-boggling moment earlier in the month where a Republican governor in Ohio has come out against the death penalty. Now, I realize this, we haven't been talking like, well, I don't think we've talked about the death penalty at all in the 6 years of these talks, but I hate the death penalty. And for a wide range of reasons. And no one has been on the case more than Abe Bonowitz here, who I believe you're in Columbus, right?
Correct. Just
So
probably down the street from you.
did you fall off your chair when Mike DeWine came out against the death penalty? I do not recall in the history of this country in the last 20 years any Republican governor ever coming out against the death penalty. And from this, by the way, we got Howie Hawkins and we're going to go to Ukraine. But Abe, can you talk about this for a few minutes?
Sure. Thanks for having me on, and greetings, everybody. It's been a fascinating conversation. Actually, we've been waiting for Mike DeWine to come out and share his perspectives on the death penalty. He's been saying since December, I'm going to be coming out with my statement soon, and we're waiting. The challenge really is not what you say, but what you do. And I want to back up to say that Governor DeWine, since he took office, took off his hat as a prosecutor. He was a county prosecutor. He was a legislator who helped write the death penalty bill, the death penalty law in Ohio. He was the attorney general who helped carry out executions. But when he became governor,
he actually, when he was AG, he participated in executions.
well, he did whatever the AG does at the time of executions, right? Which is they basically prosecute the cases and defend the challenges that the public defenders do to try to stop executions. So.
Okay.
Bottom line, though, is when he became governor, he was able to take off his prosecutor hat and put on a different hat, a governor hat, and look at the death penalty as a public policy rather than as a tool of law enforcement. And I believe he also basically was able to then become engender his consistently pro-life ethic as a Catholic, right? So, he attends St. Charles right down the street, or St. Catherine's right here next to Bexley, and they pray at every mass to end the death penalty, which is pretty amazing. In any case, Governor DeWine, since he took office, basically hung his hat on this question of the ability to get the drugs to carry out lethal injections, which is, okay, that worked. And basically what he's done is he's reprieved everybody that's got an execution date, 2 or 3 at a time. The way it works in Ohio is the Supreme Court sets execution dates, and each time a few more, we were getting closer to one, he would reprieve 2 or 3, send them back to the end of the line. There's about 30 people with valid execution dates in Ohio right now, and the Governor DeWine has chosen not to carry out one of them. And over time, basically what he did last week was explain his change in position. He helped write Ohio's death penalty law. He helped carry out executions, but he's come to the conclusion that it fails us as a public policy. And therefore, if we can't make it work, we have to get rid of it. And he called for the abolition of the death penalty. And there is legislation, Senate Bill 259 in Ohio, to abolish Ohio's death penalty. Now, he's not the first Republican governor to come out in this way. At least Governor Ryan in Illinois basically almost executed an innocent man, and that caused him to appoint a panel to look at how do we prevent the execution of an innocent person, and the legislature refused to enact any of those recommendations. So at that time, he took everybody off the death row. He commuted all their death sentences. And
this is in Illinois?
That's in Illinois,
And
and in Illinois,
when was this? When was
that
this?
well, that was in the early 2000s, and then in 2011, Illinois, I think it was 2011, Illinois abolished its death penalty, so they don't have it anymore.
Wow.
We've abolished the death penalty legislatively in New Jersey, New Mexico, Illinois, Connecticut, Maryland, New Hampshire, Colorado, Virginia, first Confederate state to abolish, Virginia. Also scrubbed out the death penalty from the statute in Delaware and Washington State, where the Supreme Courts of those states threw out their death penalty laws. So we now have the death penalty in. We don't have it in 23 states. Okay, we have a handful of states that are actively carrying out executions. We're talking about Texas, Florida, Alabama, Missouri. Tennessee is trying, and you know, there's a lot more we could say about all of that. But at the end of the day, when you have specifically about Governor DeWine in Ohio, he chose to articulate his position, now having changed, to be an advocate for ending the death penalty. For him, it was because it doesn't deter for future crime. It also became evident that it takes way too long to get a person through the system. So we're talking about people on death row for decades before maybe having an execution. And we haven't had an execution in Ohio since 2018. So the year before Governor DeWine took office. And now we have a question, you know, who's going to be the next governor? What are they going to do? And whether Governor DeWine is going to use his bully pulpit which is a question mark, how much of that he has. But what is he going to do to try to move Senate Bill 259 forward, which would abolish the death penalty? And if that doesn't move forward, what will he do? Will he commute death sentences? Will he commute all the death sentences, or some of them? And that's a question of how much power he has to do that, which is its own conversation. But at the end of the day, you know, he's got 6 more months in office, and you know, we're all trying to do what we can to help that process along, to get the governor to use his power to commute the death sentences, and also to encourage the legislature, where we think we have the votes, if we can get the bill to the floor, to abolish the death penalty. Not because we don't think people who have done awful crimes should be held accountable. Of course they should. If people are dangerous, of course we should be held safe from them. But we don't need executions in order to do that.
It's astounding. Are you saying that you think you have the votes in the Ohio legislature to approve the abolition of the death sentence?
I think in a world where people aren't afraid of Donald Trump, and where people where they're allowed to have a conscience vote. And this is how we passed the bill in these other states, New Jersey, New Mexico, Illinois, Connecticut, etc., is when they say, we're not going to force a party line vote. The head of the caucus will basically declare that we can have a conscience vote, so people can vote their conscience. And we have plenty of Republicans, like Governor DeWine, who are pro-life Catholics, consistently pro-life. So on all the life issues, which includes the death penalty. And of course, if you're a Catholic then, and you're following the current and the most recent popes, all the way back to John Paul, you have a clear teaching that the death penalty doesn't fit with Catholic teaching. So when you go to those Republican Catholics and they follow the law, or rather they follow the teachings of their faith, which, you know, we're supposed to have a separation of church and state, of course, but at the end of the day, that's where we find the votes that we need from the Republican side. Or Republicans who just recognize that the death penalty wastes a bunch of money, doesn't serve the needs of victims, fails to keep us any safer than throwing away the key would. I call life without parole as a misnomer. It should be called death by incarceration. And I do think that there are some people who, as they presently exist, should never be free, but we shouldn't necessarily always throw away the key on everybody. But at the end of the day, we have an opportunity here in Ohio over the next 6 months to at least reduce the possibility of a resumption of executions, if not maybe eliminate the death penalty entirely. Now, this is in the context of on July 2nd, we're going to have 50 years since the U.S. Supreme Court decided in Gregg versus Georgia, which was a decision that upheld the new laws, backing up 4 years. in 1972, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in Furman versus Georgia to strike down all the death penalty laws in the country, which forced states that wanted to have a death penalty to write new laws, which they did, and they were upheld in 1976 in the case Gregg versus Georgia. And so now we've had 50 years where executions have been allowed under the current law. We have an execution this Thursday in Florida. Incidentally, the 3 people that have been scheduled for execution just in June all had non-unanimous juries. Okay, now we stopped the one that was in Alabama last week. That was stopped not because the guy had a jury that voted 7-5 to not kill him, which should have been enough because, of course, Alabama changed their law and they now require a unanimous jury, except that they didn't make it retroactive. So there's 20-some guys on Alabama's death row. They are facing execution who did not have unanimous juries. Everywhere else in the country, except for Alabama and Florida, you have to have a unanimous jury to get a death sentence. So, and in Alabama now, if you're on trial today, you can't get a death sentence without a unanimous jury. In any case, that wasn't stopped because of the non-unanimous jury. It was stopped because we finally got a court to actually look at the suffering involved in gas suffocation executions. So the method of execution being gas suffocation. Alabama brought that in because they failed 3 times in a row to carry out a lethal injection. Twice, the first guy, after slicing and dicing him, they finally killed him after 3 hours of torture. Then 2 other guys, they sent them back to their cells alive because they ran out of time before they could get the IV going. So then they decided to go to gas suffocation, which involves putting on a respirator mask, like what firefighters.
You don't have to tell us. Spare us the detail, please.
Well, the bottom line is they try to. It's truly torture, and we finally got several federal courts to agree that it's torturous, and they had to find a different way to execute. That's what the court ordered. The federal judge, issued a permanent injunction on gas suffocation as long as some other method of execution is available. And the miracle was that the U.S. Supreme Court voted 6-3 not to overturn the injunction, which means that they didn't want to hear the case, but it was enough for them to say, okay, we can't do this anymore, which was beautiful. That stopped that execution, a rare thing these days. So the guy that
who are the 3 justices that voted to stop the execution?
Oh gosh,
to kill him.
The usual suspects. Thomas,
Alito,
Gorsuch, I think, and
Alito.
Oh gosh, you're killing me on this. My mind just jumped out of my mind.
Y'all
can look it up. The bigger issue, if you look at I'll put this in the link. If you look at themarshallproject.org, right on the front page right now, they have a big story about Mike DeWine and what he did, but also a story about this 50th anniversary of the Gregg decision. Now, on July 2nd, actually June 29th to July 2nd, we'll all be out on the sidewalk in front of the U.S. Supreme Court holding our annual fast and vigil to abolish the death penalty. If you're anywhere near D.C., come check that out. But also visit us at deathpenaltyaction.org and sign the petitions for the people that are coming up facing execution and learn more about the issue and what you can do about it. That's what we do, is organize protests on executions and work to pass legislation whenever we can.
Are you saying that the Catholic Church, the official position of the Catholic Church, is against the death penalty?
Correct. And Pope Leo was very, very clear on this repeatedly recently. And before him, Pope Francis, before him, Pope Benedict. My favorite thing about
Pope Benedict was Pope Benedict was against the death penalty?
That's correct. And what he is, and this is the one I quote the most, because what Pope Benedict said was, we, and I'm not Catholic, but he said, we as Catholics are called upon not just to oppose the death penalty, but to actively work against it, which is pretty remarkable. And before him, Pope John Paul II called for an end to executions as well. Thank you for sharing our webpage. This is where you can sign the petitions for the upcoming executions and learn more about. If you scroll down a little bit more, I can show you some of our other campaigns that are going on.
Well, you're you're on radio. Remember this.
Oh,
But
right. Okay.
we
So it's at
always-
deathpenaltyaction.org, but essentially you can see where you can see about the different things. We are also calling out, ICE for what we call their extrajudicial executions. We're calling on the White House not to resume or try to resume federal executions. President Biden, this was one of our big successes.
He was
Almost
Catholic.
at the end of President Biden's term, we campaigned to get him to commute all the people on federal death row, and he did commute 37 out of the 40. We wanted them to do all 40 people that were on federal death row, plus the 4 people that are on the military death row, and he did 37 out of the 40. He left the more terroristic hate crime people. So the guy that shot up the synagogue in Pittsburgh, guy that shot up the church in South Carolina, and also the Boston bomber. He left those people on death row. And again, we're not advocating to free such people. We just don't believe government should have the power to kill them or the obligation.
Well, it's always blown my mind that someone who claims to be pro-life could simultaneously support the death penalty.
Yeah.
And I always point out that Timothy McVeigh, who blew up the people in the Oklahoma City bombing at the federal building there, was given correct me if I'm wrong, I believe he was given a choice between the death penalty and life in prison, and he chose the death penalty. So what does that tell you about the death penalty as a deterrent?
I don't remember the details of whether he was given that choice. What he did do was waive his appeals and say,
Right.
go ahead and kill me. And
Yeah.
I will tell you that at the time that he was executed, a friend of mine, this guy named Bud Welch, he's still alive. His daughter, Julie, was among the 168 people killed in the Murrah City bombing, the Murrah building bombing in Oklahoma City. But Bud was, at the time that Timothy McVeigh was executed, the head of the Victims' Families Association. And he shares that by the time Timothy McVeigh was executed, more than half of the victim families didn't want the death penalty. Some who had come to forgiveness, like Bud, just didn't want to be having that on their conscience. Others wanted him to suffer more, believing
Yes,
that him
exactly.
having to wait and live out his life. He was a relatively young man when he did that. He could have lived another 30, 40, 50 years in incarceration. And
What
that's
makes
pretty much
people think? My question to supporters of the death penalty, among many, is what makes you think that the death penalty is worse than being sentenced to life in prison?
Well, that's just it. They don't know. And in fact, there's a guy named Kirk Bloodsworth. Kirk Bloodsworth is most well known for being the first person exonerated from a death sentence by DNA technology. The first one to use DNA to prove he didn't do it. And so Kirk was convicted and sentenced to death. This is a former U.S. Marine military police. And he was somehow wrongly convicted in a murder because somebody testified against him falsely. He was sentenced to death. That was overturned, and then he got a life sentence. And he wrote a book, and within his book, it's called Bloodsworth, that's his name, Bloodsworth, Kirk Bloodsworth. And he, in his book, expressed about how his life sentence was greater suffering than his death sentence.
Okay, this has been fascinating. Abe Bonowitz, I can testify you are relentless. I encountered
Thank
you
you, Harvey.
many times in Columbus and extremely effective. It's great. And this is something that just really blows my mind, the death penalty, as does the war in Ukraine, which we're going to turn to in a minute here. At some point, I just hope to God we get rid of this thing. It's ridiculous. Wait, I want to ask you, Abe, you're an expert. Can you estimate how many people in American history have been executed with the death penalty who were later proven innocent?
Well, if you want to go back to our whole history, you got to look at the Watt SP files, and that's a long thing. But we can talk about since in the current era, which is 1972. I can tell you that there have been over 200 people exonerated and freed from death row. There have also been a few dozen people who were compelled to or opted to take a plea. It's called, in some ways, an Alford plea. Basically, they're given the opportunity to either face retrial trial, and maybe we'll sentence you to death again, or you can plead guilty to this lesser offense and we'll sentence you to time served and you can walk out today. And and a lot of people have chosen that because they've already spent a couple decades in prison, and when you do that, of course, you end up with nothing, no apology from the state, no compensation, no nothing. But then there's a third set of people who were executed and had really strong arguments for their innocence, and that's also some number of people. I don't have the number in the top of my head, and there's definitely, 5% of everybody that's in prison today is estimated to be innocent, not just on death row, but across the board. But definitely people on death row in Ohio. In Ohio, Harvey, we've got a guy named Anthony Apanovich. Now, Anthony Apanovich, was the first person that I started visiting and writing to. The state did DNA testing that showed he was innocent, and then they hid it. And then somebody one day found it and sent it to the defense attorneys. And the defense attorneys did not have this. They looked at it and said, oh my gosh. And they were able to file a challenge to his conviction. And they won. And it threw out his conviction based on the DNA, because the DNA showed he was not the person who raped Marianne Flynn. If you didn't do the rape, you didn't do the murder. It didn't make any sense. So Tony was actually, his conviction was thrown out and he was freed. Okay, except the state said, judge, hold him. We want to try him again. And the judge said, show me your evidence, and released him with an ankle monitor to house arrest. So he was out on house arrest for about 2 years while the state appealed. Well, the state won their appeal. Why did they win their appeal? Because the law says you have to have been the person to ask for the DNA testing. And because Tony didn't ask for it, he was unable to avail himself to that evidence. And that overturned, on this technicality, his conviction being thrown out. And I'll never forget this, because I got a call from his lawyer saying, Abe, I don't know what's going to happen, but his conviction's been reinstated. I called Tony. He said, I don't know what's going to happen. But the next morning, they came and got him. 20 different cars came and took him back to death row, and he's still on death row, even though the evidence proves he is innocent. Okay, I got another case for you that I worked really hard on. Really quickly, a woman named Melissa Lucio in Texas was almost executed 4 years ago. The judge who sentenced her to death and the current county prosecutor both say she's innocent and have asked the courts to free her, and we're just waiting for a decision from the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals to let her out. It's been 4 years since we stopped that execution, and November was 2 years since the final filings were made, and they still haven't made a decision. It's outrageous.
Okay, well, thank Abraham, you're fabulous. Mike Hurst to Tonka and then we're going to go to Ukraine.
Hey, I'll come back anytime, Harvey. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks, you're great work. Stay with you. We got 2 questions here.
Can I just say something to Abe?
Yeah, go ahead.
Tonka.
Thank you.
Hey.
Yeah, good to see you again, Abe.
Yes.
We just saw each other a couple weeks ago at a memorial for a friend. I'm so glad to have you on and commend you for your tireless work on the death penalty, the abolition of it. And you brought up the issue of conscience, which I think right now in our country is going to be a very, very critical thing that's going on. It's happening everywhere, the difference between right and wrong. And people don't know a lot of the history of the Catholic Church. They really don't know that. For instance, I don't know how long this has been in operation, but for quite a while, it's the official teaching of the Catholic Church that simply having the possession of first strike nuclear weapons is a mortal sin, and actually working actively on their production, etc. Also, the present Pope Leo, I hear, may be working on an encyclical where I'm not sure there's a pope in the history of the Catholic Church that has ever really talked about Jesus in an encyclical, not to mention talk about a non-violent Jesus as if this is the most radical thing. Well, it is, right? But Pope Leo evidently is thinking about doing this in a major encyclical right now. But the issue of conscience, even in the issue that Danny Sheehan's working on, around the secrets, it's the one thing that has united everyone in the Congress, MAGA, progressive, non-voters, independents, etc. Everybody wants the secrets out, whether it's UFOs, whether it's Epstein, whether it's JFK, 9/11, all the patents seized by the CIA in the patent office, the inventions on energy and health that were seized. This is the thing that unites people, and there is a total a movement of conscience across the country that is now almost has all 435 congressional districts to support the elected representative, senator, or congressperson to sign a pledge that if they are elected, they will support the release of all the secrets in the country. This is the one thing that is binding everybody together now, and it's an issue of conscience. And it includes MAGA people that we don't even know about yet, MAGA people that can reach right in and seize the heart of
Right.
Alito and the most conservative people in the Supreme Court. So it's a time where conscience, right and wrong, independent conscience decision is having an effect. And I love hearing your stories about the death penalty.
Yeah, and Tatanka,
Hey.
that's great. Thank you.
What
Go
a
ahead,
great
Abe.
surprise, Tatanka, to see you. I'll just share that there's a number, including in Ohio, the three most recent heads of the Department of Corrections, who between them executed over 40 people each when they left their position as the head of the Department of Corrections in Ohio, ended up joining our movement and testifying and arguing against the death penalty. In Florida, Congressman Ron McAndrew carried out the last 3 electric chair executions as warden at Florida State Prison, left and joined our movement. He's a dear friend. He's a MAGA guy, red-hatted, as MAGA as they get, but against the death penalty. And, you know,
Great. Mike Hirsch has a hand. Mike, go ahead. Now we're going to go to Howie Hawkins.
Yeah, Abe, wonderful presentation. And I
Thank
just
you.
want to emphasize to everybody that this battle against the death penalty is winnable state by state. We have to do it. And I had the honor of meeting Mr. Bloodworth, and he was an absolutely charming person, and he recounted the details of his arrest. He was convicted on the testimony of a child who exonerated him over and over and over, and overzealous police trying to close the case kept pressuring the kid. Are you sure it wasn't him? Are you sure it wasn't him? When they found the person who actually did it after they cleared him through DNA evidence, the person was a foot shorter, way slimmer, different color hair,
Right.
different color eyes. And the child originally gave, the child witness gave testimony of the person who actually did it, but they wanted to pin it on Bloodworth for some unknown reason. This goes on.
He ended up being in prison for another crime while Bloodsworth was in prison still. Anyway, there's so
That's
much
right.
more we could talk about,
Well,
and I'd
thank
love
you.
to come back and
Thank
talk
you
more.
both so much, and really, it's phenomenal. And I didn't realize that the Catholic Church was officially, but my sister does. She runs a tchotchke booth. She sells stuff at a fair in D.C. And the woman, the MAGA woman who was put on the Supreme Court, Amy Coney Barrett, came, and I just wish I would have been there, look her in the eye, and say, "How can you claim to be pro-life and support the death penalty?"
Well, there's actually some amazing stuff about her. I think that she is personally opposed to the death penalty. She was one of the people that upheld that injunction on gas suffocation. My friend Reverend Dr. Jeff Hood wrote a whole piece about her and after that decision. Anyway, I know you got to go for other
Well,
things.
let's finally get rid. Abe, we'll have you back, and let's hope Amy Acton is against the death penalty.
Well, I think that she I've got stories about her too, and hopefully she will win.
Amy Acton, for everybody, is the Democratic candidate for governor in Ohio, and
Yes.
she has a medical background. So let's hope she does it.
Yeah, I was able. I used to live around the corner from her when I lived over on
Yeah,
Francis.
we did too. We didn't know she was there.
Yeah, well,
Anyway,
there you go. But I got a chance to speak with her a few times. But Harvey, it's great to be with you, and my neighbor in Bexley, Ohio. And
come
like I
back
said, I'll
soon.
come back anytime. And Kit, so great to see you here too.
All right,
Thanks,
you
Abe.
guys. Thank you very, very much. Vina Colley, real quick. Thank you, Abe, again. Vina
Of course.
Colley, then we go to Howie Hawkins. I want to talk about Ukraine, please. Vina, jump in real quick.
I just wanted to say that my husband worked at the maximum prison there in Lucasville. And
Oh,
I remember
wow.
Easter Day, Sunday, when they all had to go in and one of the guards got hung. They hung his body out the post. And I'm also worried about, I'm sorry, two senior, DeWine's office is over this one of your boards. And so we need to do something about the wine.
Yeah, well, it's amazing that to see a Republican governor in Ohio.
Well,
Somebody else is
call
talking.
Mike DeWine and tell him to commute all the death sentences.
Absolutely. We will do that. Okay. Well, Mike DeWine, had 11 kids, and he lost one somewhere along the way. But he's been an interesting anomaly here. Okay, we're now going to go to Howie Hawkins, who's been with us patiently. My initial idea was to have a debate. A very, very good friend of mine once recently at a lunch wanted to give me 100-to-1 odds that Russia would defeat Ukraine. And I'm desperately want to take that bet. I keep seeing all this stuff. I don't think he's on with us. He had a root canal today or something, but I'm going to have him come back. I do want to have a debate about Ukraine. And Howie, you from the Green Party have been in touch with people, a lot of people directly in Ukraine. Can you give us a quick update? Everything I'm seeing is saying that Ukraine is kicking Russia's butt. And the other question I really have for you is, upon further review, will the rest of Europe actually allow Russia to defeat Ukraine? France, Germany, England, all the major countries in Europe, seems to me they have a vested interest in not having another Sudetenland, another attack, of 1939 on Poland. Am I overstating that case? Go ahead, Howie, and then we'll go to Dorothy.
Well, to start with the second part first, the Europeans are going to support Ukraine, but not enough to defeat Russia within Ukraine. They've been slow on ammunition, slow on funding. The funding has been in the form mostly of loans and not grants, which makes Ukraine dependent on Western financial interests, which for the left in Ukraine, they're fighting, they say, Russian tanks and Western banks. So the Europeans, and it depends on which country you're in, the Scandinavian and Baltic countries are very strong, especially the left they call themselves the Nordic Green Alliance, but it's parties like the Red Green Alliance in Denmark, which alone gives $300,000 a year to the socialist group in Ukraine, the Sotsialny Ruch, or social movement. So, it's like they're giving them enough not to lose, but not enough to win. And they had the same critique of Biden. Of course, Trump is like cut off everything to Ukraine. Although coming out of this G7 meeting, Zelensky announced that Trump said he would let Ukraine and European countries build anti-aircraft missiles to intercept Russian ballistic missiles and cruise missiles under license, which Trump has never done before. But on the other hand, you can't trust.
Well, does Trump get a cut on that? That's what we really need to know.
Well, his one of his sons, I think, is invested in the drone business. So,
yes, that's right.
He'd probably be looking for that angle if it goes forward, but we'll have to see. So in terms of, I was talking yesterday actually with a historian who did a year contract as a drone operator for the Ukrainian Armed Forces. He just got, finished his contract in the spring. And he said that Ukrainians now are much more optimistic than they were as they went into the winter, facing the lack of energy and the freezing on the front lines. The Russians cannot gain land. In fact, for the last 3 months, they've lost a little bit. It's really hard to gain land because infantry is so exposed, because the drones take them out, whether it's Russian or Ukrainian. What the Ukrainians have been doing is hitting Russian military supply lines, infrastructure, and their oil production and export infrastructure. And it's really hit Russia's ability to finance its war machine and to supply its troops. I mean, for example, in Crimea, they've taken out, the Ukrainians have taken out so much of the air defenses that Ukraine can now hit military and oil infrastructure pretty much at will. And so this week, the Crimean governor said, we're not selling gas to private individuals or to businesses. It's all going to the military because they're so short. They can't get it in because Ukraine has taken out the road and rail lines going through from Russia through Zaporizhia and Kherson into Crimea, those oblasts along the Black Sea. And just yesterday, they took out the remaining ferries that were taking rail lines across the Kerch Strait. There's the Kerch Bridge, but they haven't been using it for heavy military equipment because it's been structurally compromised. And the Ukrainians are in a position now where they could take that out. So they're having success at that level. So, you know, Trump said when he and J.D. Vance ambushed Zelensky in the Oval Office, you know, February 28th, that Zelensky had no cards to play. Well, it turns out he had a lot of cards to play, and Trump was surprised. Trump thought Ukraine would collapse over this winter, and he had to admit
so did pretty much everybody else. I mean, this guy's not dumb. The guy who maybe the offer of 100-1, I said, you got to be kidding me. So here's the second piece of the question, Howie. And Dorothy, can we get to you in a minute? I got to ask Howie this question. I just saw a big piece that went through how the Chinese have been virtually unaffected by the loss of fuel coming through the Hormuz because they are so deeply vested now in renewables. And the question becomes, will Ukraine has 19 atomic reactors. 2 of them already have been hit. One at Zaporizhia, and also the Russian one, the one that in Donetsk where the Ukraine went in, and one at Chernobyl, obviously. So the question is there movement in Ukraine to go 100% renewable?
Yeah, that's strategic. It's not even, I saw an article where China going renewable was not about climate, it was strategic because they were dependent on foreign oil.
No, it's definitely not about climate at all. It's economic and it's military.
Yeah, Putin has given Ukraine every incentive to go renewables because, number one, they're more defensible because they're distributed. You can use microgrids instead of a big centralized grid. And so you can't take out the energy infrastructure, you know, with a few bombs hitting central power plants. And so Ukraine has made that decision. They're committed to that. And if they just accelerated that, I mean, they were going for net zero by 2050, like a lot of countries. Now they're trying to do it as fast as possible.
Well, it's quite amazing. And you may want to talk about that. We can jump into it further. But the piece on China was devastating. China, you know, they use fossil fuels. And by the way, there are 2 major companies in China that are producing electric cars. One is BYD, and the other is 4 letters that I can never remember. And they have now are now marketing a car with a sodium battery, not lithium, sodium, that can, on a single charge, which they can do in 10 minutes, go 900 miles. I mean, think about that. And it sells for under 20 grand. I mean, that's game over for the American auto industry. I mean, you know, we've got tariffs and all that, but Europe is going. You've got a car that sells for under 20 grand, and it's a full size car, under 20 grand, single charge in 10 minutes, 900 miles. It's and the battery is made out of sodium. It's staggering to me. And so here we are. So that and the Ukraine war, and along with the Persian Gulf War, clearly the Ukraine war has changed the dynamic on energy production, and so has the Persian Gulf War, right, Howie?
Yeah, you just, I think, described my next car.
Well,
Really,
you're gonna
I'm
have to.
serious.
You have to. Well, I just look in the Times today. The New York Times runs a piece. Claudia Sheinbaum, the president of Mexico, has unveiled an electric car made in Mexico. And I'll go into the specs in a week. I don't remember offhand, but it's pretty amazing. And it's a passenger car, and it's beyond anything you can buy in the US at this point. And this is in Mexico.
In an article I just referenced where the writer was talking about how China went renewable for strategic reasons, he opens it up by saying he got out the train in Beijing and it was quiet.
Yes, I
And
heard.
he hadn't been there for 15 years. He said it had totally changed. It was quiet because all the traffic was electric vehicles.
That's going to be really disorienting in LA. I got to tell you. I don't know how you can go around LA without traffic noise, but I guess it's going to happen, right? They'll probably pipe in traffic noise just so people won't get disoriented.
You actually need some noise. The one time I
Yeah.
had an electric vehicle, I rented it. I didn't try to rent it, but it gave me an electric vehicle. And it was so quiet, people kept jumping in front of the car on the street because they didn't hear me
Yeah.
coming.
I know it's a problem actually, but anyway, when we got I rented a car with my daughter. She was very young, and she kept calling it a hybrid, which I thought was a great word. Dorothy Reich, you want to jump in here? Dorothy, you there? I got to unmute her somehow. So yes, go ahead, Dorothy.
Yeah, I had raised my hand before you started talking about Ukraine, although I think that Ukraine's going to kick Russia's butt. I think these little cheap drones are changing warfare forever.
Well, you're right. There was an article in the New York Times about a year ago. A very good top level reporter from the Times embedded with the Ukrainians. And it was earth shaking to read this because clearly it's changed. Drones have changed the entire nature of warfare. And they have also, for those of us who've been following nuclear power, staggeringly terrifying because we've already had Chernobyl hit. We've already had Zaporizhia hit. Anybody who knows about nuclear knows that a single drone could take out any nuclear power plant, over 400 on the US. They don't have to crack. I'm not going to go into detail, but it's a piece of cake, and I'm terrified. Got 94 reactors in the United States. It'd take $1,000 drone to give us another Chernobyl, for God's sake. So it's terrifying. But you're right. Drones have completely changed the nature of warfare. Completely.
Can I just hang in here for a little bit and then I want to do a rant on an election that took place in California?
Okay, but Howie, do you have anything else? Anybody else want anything about Ukraine? I'm going to try and get a debate, Howie, so we'll see.
And I'll tell him to his face. I want that bet.
Yeah, we can take up a pool and fund a whole new network here.
I would just say that in Ukraine there's a lot of propaganda that they don't have political rights. Well, yesterday 5,000 people had a gay pride march in Kyiv. Now the right wing had a march. They had less than 100 people. The polling shows 70% of Ukrainians support equal rights for gay people and non-discrimination. So on the other hand, in Russia, and this is one reason why Ukrainians don't want to be occupied, is that advocating gay rights and now even identifying as a gay person is a crime. So that's one thing they have. And then the other thing going on in Kyiv itself, my friends in the Sotsialny Ruch, the socialist group, have been out on the streets organizing protests against the proposed transit fare hike. And they've got a big response. Every time the Kyiv City Council meets, They got hundreds of people outside with signs saying, don't raise the transit fares. So, you know, civil society and democratic life goes on in Ukraine. And
Well,
there's,
there you go.
yeah.
And again, I want to hand it to the Albanians. According to the New York Times, there was 1 million people in the streets of Albania opposing what's Jared Kushner's new resort project. And there's only 2.4 million people in all of Albania, and 1 million out on the streets. That's got to be the highest percentage that I've heard of anywhere. Okay, I also want to reiterate, it started an hour, almost 2 hours ago, that June 25th, a few days from now, today, by the way, is the solstice. So happy longest day of the year, everybody. And on the 25th, which is Thursday, is the 150th anniversary of Little Bighorn. And again, I want to recommend Netflix has a fantastic 2-part documentary about Sitting Bull. And in this, amazing, you're a historian for 50 years. The guy who was most responsible for wiping out the buffalo was William Tecumseh Sherman, the guy who burned Atlanta. And I had no idea. After the war, he became a general in the Union Army out west, and he was the one who decided that the way to get rid of the indigenous was to get rid of the buffalo. For God's sakes, it's one of the biggest crimes against the earth in the history of the human race, and it's from this general from Ohio, for God's sakes. Anyway, Dorothy, did you want to say something else? And then we'll go to Dave Saltman here.
I just wanted to, you know, I think Dr. Nancy and Dr. Ruth, maybe not Dr. Ruth, but Dr. Nancy certainly was subjected to the same deluge of filthy mailers, pop-ups, and TV ads that I was subjected to during this last election for state senate. A guy named Brian Goldsmith, who's a multimillionaire, his family are multimillionaires. They seem to own a lot of the Democratic Party, at least in Los Angeles, but also Nancy Pelosi, because they've been running campaigns and making huge donations. Managed to get endorsements from Barbara Boxer, Nancy Pelosi, Pete Buttigieg, Hillary Clinton, just ridiculous endorsements in a state senate race. And on top of the endorsements, they spent $5 million sending out racist and homophobic ads.
Oh my God.
That one of their opponents was gay and the other opponent was Muslim, a doctor. So I know Nancy and Ruth know him, Shy Roy. And they darkened his face, they puffed up his face, they made him look like some kind of a gangster. And they said that he was responsible for the defund the police. I don't know that the Democratic Party ever supported that, but they said that Shy was responsible for that. And they sent out these filthy mailers. And I was also subjected to pop-ups, so that every time I went into my computer, I would get and tried to read a newspaper or something, I would get Shy's puffed up face with some red halo around it, and saying he wanted to defund the police and he supported George Gascon, and just a whole litany of things that he did that made him seem like a criminal. The John Erickson mailers were just mailers, and a couple of TV ads, a deluge of TV ads on Shy Roy. And Shy had the Democratic Party endorsement. He had the endorsement of every Democratic club. He had so many endorsements, and he came in fourth because of these attack ads. John Erickson managed to come in first, and Brian came in second. The Republican came in third. He almost knocked John Erickson out. They would have had him or the Republican.
Well, it's definitely a warning sign, Dorothy, of what's going to come in the fall. I mean, you know, you've got these tech billionaires and now a trillionaire who's going to spend you know, all the money in the world to keep control of Congress and to keep supporting Trump. I mean, this is
not supporting Trump. This was to support. This is Democrat against
right.
Democrat.
No, I understand. Well, sorry to hear it.
We're going to deal with it. We're going to deal with it, and hopefully this Brian will be out of politics forever. But I don't know if Nancy or Mila or Ruth has anything to say about this, whether they felt the same way I do, homophobic ads, racist ads.
Well, Dorothy, thank you for that. Anybody want? I know that Ruthie wanted to say something today. I've got Dave Saltman with his hand up, looking very much like a Buddha with great things to say. Dave Saltman, do you want to jump in here?
I have a question about Ukraine and about the nuclear plants. Are these places not protected against attack?
You're right. They're not protected.
They're not. No.
They're protected. They're protected like everything there is with anti-aircraft systems. Now the drones are, Ukraine's still pretty good at shooting them down. And they have a variety of ways of doing that. The missiles, they need Patriots, Patriot anti-missile missiles. And they're running low on those. So what the drones have done is hit substations that power cooling at the nuclear stations, and also the spent fuel rods. In fact, a couple of weeks ago, Russia hit a facility for spent fuel rods near Chernobyl. So the nukes are vulnerable like everything else. If Russia really wanted to start firing ballistic missiles at nukes, they could create a catastrophe.
Yeah,
So
but
far, it's
I
just
understand.
been some drone harassment, and more, I think, with the intent of psychological terrorism.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems, as I understand drones, because they're basically cheap but very effective, but they need a direct hit. They need direct impact before they explode. So wouldn't it be a simple matter to build an iron cage of some kind around these plants and defend them against drones? I mean, the whole
help a little bit
of warfare is defense increases to meet the new offense. It doesn't sound like that difficult of a military problem to solve.
Those would be big iron cages. I mean, nukes are not small structures. And
what they should do, they should take the cage that they built on the White House lawn and move it over to Chernobyl. And put
there you go. Perfect solution.
Yeah, it wouldn't be big enough.
I'm serious. I think it would be it'd probably be very cheap to build an effective defense to those things and nullify the whole drone warfare concept.
Not going to happen. It's not going to happen. Well, of course, the problem with the cage on the White House lawn is it's got blood all over it, but that might enhance it. That would keep the vampires away. Myra Reeson, did you want to say something here?
Oh, I just wanted to respond to Dorothy. So I hadn't heard about all of that horrific negative advertising, and I'm shocked, and I will work with you, Dorothy, to make sure that whoever was responsible for that is held accountable. And yeah, it's really a shame. And let's get back to Zaporizhia and drones. And I mean, we're terrified because over 400 atomic reactors around the world are all vulnerable. They're all sitting. There are already, pre-deployed nuclear weapons.
Exactly. And Salty, about putting a cage up, the problem, I don't want to get too specific here, but the problem with defending a nuclear reactor is that there's so many different things you can hit to take out. You don't have to go anywhere near the reactor to take out a reactor. I mean, it's insane how vulnerable they are. And Kevin Camps is on with us to talk about Myla. I mean, what we know about nuclear, and Howie, of course, what you know about a nuclear reactor is how I could list 10 different places here where you can hit the periphery of a nuclear plant and take it out. Go nowhere near the dome. They just had a fire at Fermi in Michigan, for God's sakes. And it was nowhere, it wasn't on the thing, on the dome or anything. And since we're talking about Little Bighorn, Fermi is right around the corner from the home of George Armstrong Custer, for God's sakes, which I've always loved that. But here we are, So, yeah, I mean, you can build a cage around a reactor and it won't matter.
I'm here in Los Angeles, there was a fire at some plant that manufactures things that are poisonous if they burn and get in the air. I mean, there's just so many targets. You don't even need to get a nuclear plant. There are just factories, all kinds of places that you could put a drone at, attacked by drone, and cause untold environmental damage and death from inhaling all the crap
Right.
that we manufacture.
Well, as someone who lived dead center between the Eaton fire to the east and the Palisades fire to the west, I can testify to what Dorothy is saying here. I mean, talk about being terrified. Steve Caruso, you got your hand in. Tatanka and Dave, we want to talk a bit about the media.
Yeah, there was a picture earlier where it showed a red strip going diagonally across the screen in Ukraine, and that's the occupied territory that Russia has taken from Ukraine. And you can see the white dots that were in them. I'll put it up again. Those were drone strikes from Ukraine into that zone. So they've got 1,000,000 drones, 1,000,001 drones. They were trying to put nets up, okay, to prevent the drones from hitting trucks and so forth. What's a net going to do? Nothing.
And then Putin,
if I remember correctly, that graphic that you're talking about,
yeah,
all of those targets were along the supply routes.
Yes, exactly.
That makes perfect sense. They were attacking supply convoys.
Yeah.
And I wanted to confirm, yes, there was a piece about that. And then I wanted to confirm with Howie, is it true that Ukrainian have forsworn attacks on private citizens? I mean,
yes, that's their public policy. Russia says the same thing, but Sunday night, maybe I didn't say this, that 11 people were killed and 91 injured in civilian areas of Ukraine. That's a typical day. And a couple of weeks ago, maybe it was last week, they hit the big monastery in Kyiv, which is almost 1,000 years old. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's like the Taliban taking out those Buddhist statues in the side of that mountain, or the Islamic State destroying heritage sites in Mosul in Iraq and Palmyra in Syria. It's cultural genocide. And so, that goes on every day. And Russia says they aren't attacking civilians, but thousands of civilians have been killed. The Ukrainians, you can know the truth of those claims by seeing what gets hit. In Ukraine, it's civilian infrastructure like power plants and civilian apartment buildings. And rail, they've taken out public buses and passenger rails. Whereas Ukraine is hitting oil refineries, oil storage depots. I think there was a screen put up, showed a bunch of those oil depots burning. They hit military industrial factories. They hit and military supply lines. So the Ukraine hits military targets. Russia hits a lot of civilian targets on purpose. You hitting that 1,000-year-old UNESCO World Heritage Site. That doesn't happen by accident. That's on a big campus in the middle of Kyiv, and it was hit right on top of the monastery. So
you're absolutely right. But of course, the difference is that Ukraine is defending its home territory, and they're attacking Russia's military capacity. Russia has to travel to Ukraine to attack, and there's nothing there to attack except the civilian. I'm not defending it. I'm saying this is their strategy. It was the same as the U.S. bombing of Dresden in World War II. Same concept. There weren't any military targets per se. There were just people to scare, and they destroyed the entire city. The one Kurt Vonnegut wrote about.
Yeah, that Slaughterhouse 5. Well, God, this is mind-boggling. We're almost out of time. We got 47 people with us. Alison, did you want to jump in? And then Dave and I we're going to have a big talk with Tatanka about the media, but I don't think we're going to get to it, Dave. You guys will have to come back next week.
I had a couple of really good billionaire jokes.
All right, well, Alison, be quick, and then we can get Dave.
Well,
Yeah, 420 is,
my comment was actually going to be about media and Ukraine, so it may be the perfect segue
go ahead.
because I wanted to recommend to everybody, if you haven't already done it, to go on to Netflix and to download and to watch and to stream. I marathoned it, but The Servant of the People, are you all familiar with The Servant of
No.
the People on Netflix? So The Servant of the People is to me exactly how media can be used effectively for political change, because The Servant of the People was written as a comedy series by Zelensky before he became the president of Ukraine. And the premise of the whole entire show is, on the very first pilot, it shows three oligarchs who have been planning who they're going to put in the elections, and they can't decide who to put in, so they leave it up to the people. And Zelensky gets elected to be president and doesn't follow any of the rules. And it was comedy. It was before the Ukraine, but I cannot even begin to tell you how important it is for, I think, all of us to watch it, because it gave me such insight into
Oh my God.
this is why there is a Ukraine
So
war.
it actually starred Zelensky. I
Exactly.
definitely,
When he was elected, they were talking about this, but it didn't really
Yeah.
register until
There's only 3 seasons, because in the third season, instead of him acting in a show about him being elected as
really
president,
elected.
he actually was elected. And the show is a comedy masterpiece, but it also was such an important highlighting of how, if somebody who was just a real person got a hold of the government from the oligarchy, look at what they could do. So I cannot tell you how much I recommend that show.
all right. Howie, you were going to jump in?
Well, I was just going to say that, well, it was what I was thinking was, Ukraine, Zelensky was elected Times Man of the Year. And at the time, everybody was comparing him to Churchill. And what Zelensky said is, I don't want to be compared to Churchill. He was an imperialist.
Right.
I want to be compared to George Orwell and Charlie Chaplin. Which I have my criticisms of Zelensky, but I love that statement.
Right. Well,
Zelensky
also,
also does get into some of the Greek, basically the democracy. He's a history teacher in the show. So he's bringing you the history of who he believes,
well,
and
also,
why democracy is critical.
he does not, thankfully, smoke a cigar. And I want to recommend another. I think I did previously. There's a phenomenal two-part series on Netflix about U.S. Grant. And it was funded partially by DiCaprio. And you come to really love Grant. He was quite an amazing guy.
Trustee, I thought you said.
But all the way through the thing,
The
he
wife.
smokes a cigar. And
Saying
I
that
think that's Dorothy. Can you mute Dorothy, please? Dorothy, there you go. And all the way through the thing, and he died of throat cancer. And every time he lights up in the series, I just want to say, put out the cigar, God, But what can I tell you? So yes, we'll look at that one, and we'll look at the one on U.S. Grant from Netflix. I hope to God that Netflix is able to stand up to the assault from Ellison, because Netflix has put out some tremendous documentaries. I mean, anyway, so Tatanka and Salty, we can't begin to do what we want to do on the media in 7 minutes. So you guys got to come back next week, please. And we didn't get to data centers either.
You want to hear one billionaire joke?
Absolutely, yes.
And I was there when this happened, so I can testify to this. So when at the end of the golden age of CBS, as you undoubtedly know, Mr. Paley sold the business to Larry Tisch.
Oh yeah.
And Larry Tisch immediately started. It was really the beginning of.
Well, he was a real estate mogul in New York.
Correct. That's right. And his daughter or granddaughter is now the chief of police of New York City. Anyway, he started firing people right away. It was the beginning of this. Really, what we're seeing today is the culmination of many years of sort of, chipping away at the greatness of the old CBS. And this is right around when I left the company and went to work at public television. But before I did that, I did some work for, if you guys remember, Spy magazine. Is that right? One of my friends was the editor of Spy, and I did a fair bit of work for them and for the other parody publications. So it was all comedians that were working together. And one of the stories we ran at Spy was about Larry Tisch. And remember that Spy is the place that made up the epithets for public figures: short-fingered vulgarian Donald Tisch. And they made up, Donald Trump, short-fingered vulgarian, which he's still angry about today. And for Larry Tisch, they called him churlish dwarf billionaire Larry Tisch. And one of his PR troubleshooters called up my friend, the editor, and said, "You've really gone too far this time, this will not stand." And so my friend said, "Okay." He said, what's the problem? What are you talking about? He says, they said, "Well, technically, he's not a dwarf." Okay. And so the next issue, we ran a correction, and it said, CBS called and they complained that we had called Mr. Tisch a churlish dwarf billionaire. And they wished to note for the record that he is technically and medically not a dwarf. And then I think this is we'll see where it goes on the laugh meter. With this correction, it ran a picture of Larry Tisch, and the caption said, "Not his real size."
Well, we like that.
So that's how one billionaire can fight another billionaire. The billionaire behind Spy, who turned out to be, I forgot if they were the yeast people or the advanced people, can fight off against the Tisch billions. Anyway,
I'm sure a conversation like that happened with the first Secretary of State under Trump, trying to decide whether Trump was an idiot or a moron.
It was the guy from Exxon called him a moron.
Exxon,
Exxon. The guy called him a moron.
Right.
So there should be a caption under Trump, "Not a moron."
Yeah, and he was Trump's first Secretary of State.
Or
he quit because I can't work with this moron anymore.
You're right. Well, apologies to the morons. There was a great op-ed in the New York Times today or the other day. There is a term from ancient Greece that describes a person who has too much money and who is totally obsessed with getting more money. And it's a Greek term, and I sent it to Steve. Maybe you have it, Steve, the op-ed. And Plato actually talked about human beings, and this was a factor in the Peloponnesian War between Athens and Sparta, that the governments are taken over by people who have way more money. And Plato, the old ancient philosophy for Plato, said that any society where a person has 4 times more money than the average person, all that money needs to be confiscated. He said you cannot have, and Plato was no Democrat, small d or capital D. And he said, if you have people who have 4 times as much money as the average person, that money has to be taken away. Can you imagine? And then this article, I'll have to have it for you next week. It's an amazing article. Can you imagine the ratio of Elon Musk's net, I hate to say his worth. He's not, nobody's worth $1 trillion. Come on. You know, his bank account or whatever it is. Can you imagine the ratio of his bank account to the average bank account of an American citizen?
Could you remember, and I don't know if he's still alive, is Bill Gates' father still alive?
His father, I don't know.
Yeah, because his father said he advocated every 10 years. He says this, you know, capitalism is like a monopoly game. And every 10 years, all the assets of everyone, every billionaire should be seized, redistributed to people, and everybody starts over again. No inherited wealth. That was his father.
Well, from his lips to God's ears, this
Yeah.
has been another incredible program. We're headed on 420. Salty's about to toke up here. Everybody, Steve Caruso, thank you for engineering. Mike Hirsch, again, condolences, and thank you for your contributions to this. It's been a phenomenal session. We put Ray together with Anthony. That was great. And everybody, I deeply appreciate all of you. Thank you so much. And we'll see you next week in Solartopia. 2 weeks from now, we will not meet, by the way. That'll be July 4th. So next week we will. And by then we'll have another celebration for Little Bighorn. Okay. Go look at that Sitting Bull documentary on now's the time on the anniversary of Little Bighorn on Netflix. All right, you guys. See you next week. No nukes. See you in Solartopia.